Dobrze, wracając w każdym razie do agendy, króciutko wstęp do Scale Computing zrobi Jerzy, nasz Storage System konsultant, i to będzie króciutki wstęp w języku polskim. Następnie przejdziemy do części teoretycznej i tutaj głos zajmie Thorsten Schaffer z firmy Scale Computing. Porozmawiamy o rozwiązaniach hiperkonwergentnych. W kolejnej części przejdziemy już do live demo, gdzie William z firmy właśnie Scale Computing przedstawi rozwiązanie HC3 na webowym interfejsie zarządzającym. I w następnej części przejdziemy już do zadawania pytań. Oczywiście czat znajduje się w prawej części. Można tam śmiało zadawać pytania zarówno w języku polskim, jak i w języku angielskim. Jeśli będą pytania w języku polskim i Jerzy nie będzie znał odpowiedzi na to pytanie, będziemy posiłkować się wiedzą ekspertów z firmy Scale Computing, więc pytanie na pewno zostanie przetłumaczone. Z mojej strony to wszystko drogą wstępu i Jerzy, oddaję Tobie teraz już głos.
Witam Państwa bardzo serdecznie. Ja nie będę miał żadnej prezentacji, ja tylko kilka słów powiem. Prezentację będzie prowadził pan kolega Thorsten Schaffer z firmy Scale Computing. To jest osoba odpowiedzialna za region Europy w tej firmie. Natomiast w dalszej części będziemy mieli także prezentację kolegi Williama Kohlenburga, który jest ekspertem technicznym, konsultantem firmy Scale Computing na całą Europę. Tak, tylko kilka słów o firmie Scale Computing. Jest to firma, która bardzo, bardzo dynamicznie rozwija się w ostatnich latach, ma bardzo dużo nowych wdrożeń, oferuje kompletne rozwiązanie wirtualizacyjne. O szczegółach oczywiście opowie kolega Thorsten, ja nie będę wkraczał w szczegóły. W każdym razie jest to kompletne rozwiązanie sprzętowe, wirtualizacyjne, włącznie z wirtualizatorem. Także tutaj kupując to mamy już wszystko, co nam jest potrzebne, żeby uruchamiać maszyny wirtualne. Jego główną cechą jest, i za to chwalą go użytkownicy, łatwość obsługi tego całego rozwiązania, łatwość nauczenia się i późniejszej administracji. Jeśli będą, tak jak kolega Błażej powiedział, jeśli będą jakiekolwiek pytania, proszę o zadawanie je na czacie. W języku polskim lub angielskim to nie ma większej różnicy. No i oczywiście, jeśli napiszecie Państwo w języku angielskim, to koledzy od razu z firmy Scale Computing zobaczą i pewnie pierwsi się wyrwą do odpowiedzi. Także to będzie takie jakby ułatwienie. Natomiast jeśli chodzi o sprawy handlowe, tak tylko może nie wiem, jak to się dalej potoczy, czy będziemy mieli tą sekundkę na końcu. Jeśli chodzi o sprawy handlowe, to oczywiście proszę o kontakt ze mną, ewentualnie z jakąkolwiek osobą odpowiedzialną za Państwa firmy w naszej firmie w Alstorze i wtedy oczywiście poszukamy dla Państwa rozwiązania. Chcę tylko dodać jeszcze jedną taką bardzo ważną informację, że to, co Państwo widzicie w tej chwili, to cała dzisiejsza prezentacja może być także zrobiona na żądanie dla klienta, jeśli będziecie Państwo mieli potencjalnych klientów. Dobrze, to już i tak jest chyba za przydługi mój wstęp. Kolega Thorsten Schaffer już czeka i tak spogląda, prawda, kiedy będzie jego kolej. Także Thorsten, here's the time for you to join our event. It was maybe for too long my introduction, but now it's your time.
Thank you very much. So let me shortly share my screen. And I will go just through only a few slides and talking a little bit about Scale Computing, who we are, what we're doing, how are things doing. And later on, we hand over to William, my SE colleague, and he will show us Scale Computing in live. So as far as I heard, I was already introduced. So my name is Thorsten. Whenever there is a question, just call me or drop me an email. The email address is quite simple, thorsten@scalecomputing.com. I will be the single point of contact in the region. So just let me know if you have anything and we can talk about it. Scale Computing, basically, we are an US-based company in Indianapolis headquartered, and we are settled down in Europe, in the Netherlands. So our European headquarters in Herzogenbosch, very nice city in the Netherlands. We have a couple of sales offices around in, for example, in Germany, where I'm located, in South Africa, United Kingdom, all over Europe, you can say. So we're accessing the market from there. What we are doing, so we are doing a hyper-converged solution. Our solution is based to be pretty simple. So we want to reduce the complexity from a traditional IT infrastructure point. So focused from a market point of view, you can say we're focused on small and medium customers, mid-market customers on the one hand. On the other hand, also distributed enterprise and edge computing customers, which means whenever you need to leave your data center, then it's a so-called edge scenario where it's quite a very good idea to talk about scale. As I said, in our DNA, it's part of being very, very simple. You will see that later on in the live demo. And we are not alone in the world, so we have a couple of technology partners. Here is Lenovo and Intel as our hardware platform partner. There's to mention Google as our public cloud platform partner. And from a software point of view, it's Acronis, Parallels, and Leostream. So that's not saying that we're only working with these guys. So we're working with each and every solution on top you can think about, basically. But there's a special thing for these technology partners. So whenever they are built in the whole stack, we take over the support, which means you have a single point of contact whenever there's a reason to call support, which means there's only an easy support model as well. That is 24/7, 365 for hard and software. That's easy. Just take the phone, call the colleagues, and you have best of scale support. And the support is quite good. So we have a very high net promoter score, which is at 91. It's measured by -100 up to +100. From my point of view, we do have the highest rating in the HCI industry. In each vendor presentation, you need to have a customer slide. So we have a couple of different customers, like medium customers like Neni in Austria or Zillertaler Gletscherbahn in Austria as well. There are a couple of in the rest of Europe. These are basically medium or SME customers. We have edge computing customers like Ahold Delhaize. They're running right now more than 800 stores with scale HC3. Basically, every of our customers is responding to us and saying they have now much better availability, less administration tasks, less things to do, and they're saving a lot of money when they're using scale instead of traditional IT infrastructure solution. Why you should do hyperconvergence? Basically, the main thing is the market is growing. These are dates from an analyst, so that's, I think, from Gartner. Traditional systems, traditional IT infrastructure stacks will stay flat, and hyperconvergence is rapidly growing, and hopefully you will take your piece of the cake from that growing market. We are positioning ourselves in the market as we getting a much less TCO with scale HC3 than other hyperconverged solutions like VMware vSAN, Nutanix, HP SimpliVity, you name it. But you can easily compare as well with traditional systems like 1, 2, 3 servers. A little bit of.
I'm sorry that I'm stopping you, but we cannot see the slides at this moment. Probably you stop sharing your screen.
I've still the. You haven't seen any slide?
We see from the beginning like 2 slides and some stuck somewhere. And
okay,
stop sharing.
I stop and start again.
Yeah. Okay. If this will not work, let's open from our system here presentation. It's still here. Yeah, now we can see it. Okay.
You have seen the customer slide, I think?
We see just two first slides. We didn't see that one.
Okay, that was the customer slide I have spoken about. So as I said, every customer is having much more availability, spending less money, spending less time in administration work and stuff. And that was my last slide, where I was noticed that the slides don't show up. Anyway, as I said, hyperconvergence is rapidly growing. Take your piece of the cake. As I said, the positioning in the market. So with Scale HC3, you will get always the lowest TCO in the market if you compare that for sure with other HCI solutions like VMware vSAN, like Nutanix, like HP SimpliVity. So as we are built for really small solution, that's depending on the architecture, we can really run in edge environments or with organization where they have less or low or limited IT staff, IT people. And for you as a partner, it's important to know. So I think the margins are much higher than when you're selling Scale to your customers than just selling a couple of VMware servers and licenses stuff. And you have also less competition because Scale is an appliance-based solution, and you can only sell Scale in Poland right now through Alstor SDS. And we are protecting the deals in our partner program, and there's no way for our other partner to give the same Scale quote to the same customer. And no one can build it by its own. So on every hardware, VMware is running. So Scale are appliance-based. So that means if you give away a Scale appliance-based quote, you have more or less no competition with Scale. And as you have seen, the TCO, meaning the pricing, is better with a Scale solution than VMware server storage stuff. Will be much easier to win projects than before. Why is that? Because complexity meaning cost. So if you go with HC3 Edge, or that's the name of the solution itself, it's easy to use. You have single vendor support. You don't need that much training. So VMware has 118 training courses. There's everything built in. Go here. For example, VMware is very complex. So there are 118 training courses on their academy. If you will find the Scale Academy, you can tell me how many courses we do have. So as we don't have a Scale Academy, there are no trainings. They're just the training in the partner portal, which means it's watching a few videos and answering a couple of questions. So if you do that right now after that call, I'm pretty sure you don't need to watch the videos. You can easily answer the questions as well. Hoppla, sorry. So what does it mean for mid-market customers or SMB customers? So whenever they're using traditional infrastructure, it's like driving into an accident. And what they really want is just driving with a normal car, sitting in, push the button and drive. What are we doing now? So we're doing real hyperconvergence, which means we're combining server, storage, and virtualization into one single solution, which is called Scale HC3. You know that I'm pretty sure everybody of you has worked with these kind of scenarios. Here we're talking about VMware, but could also be Hyper-V or Xen Server or what you name it. You have the virtualization layer, you have a switching layer, you have a storage, maybe one storage, two storage, it's mirrored or not, however. There are a big complexity, especially when I'm thinking about you need to update the solution overall. You first need to read a couple of HCLs because you need to know which firmware of all the devices, of all the cards needs to be on the correct level to be in a supported environment. Hyperconvergents want to help to make these things easy. And for sure, that works depending on how much you need to pay. That's like an HCI tax. If you see on the left-hand side, most of the other HCI solutions based on the so-called virtual storage appliance model, which means a virtual machine is running on top of the hypervisor, sitting in the file system, getting the resources, maybe through a RAID controller, showing it to itself and the other nodes through the network. In other words, if you want to change in a Word document here from a semicolon into a comma, you need to go through 36 steps. That means you need to put on really much resources underneath. So Nutanix is doing it more or less at the best, and that way they're using at least 24 gig of RAM and 4 cores per node. If you compare it with the right-hand side, that's a scale integrated hypervisor model. So there are only 12 points to change it in the Word document, which means the latency is much lower, the performance is better, and we only need 4 gig of RAM per node. As we have a completely different storage architecture, which means we do have a distributed block-based file system, it allows us to create about 5,000 snapshots without any performance issues per virtual machine. Feel free to do that with an VMware or Hyper-V scenario. In other words, you get more with scale, or the density of virtual machines on a scale system could be much higher than in other solutions. And it brings us in the way to build the smallest HCI cluster of the world. Everything is easy in the solution, I told you already. So we have a unified management from out of an HTML5 browser. In a few moments, we will see that in the live demo by William. Deployment is quite quickly done, so you need pretty much more time to rack and stack your systems than the installation of scale itself. So from a feature set, there's everything included: self-healing, high availability, backup, replication, snapshots. You can easily build disaster recovery or disaster recovery as a service, backup as a service. We have deduplication. We will see that later on in the demo as well. So we take care of the upgrade management overall, meaning we do also upgrades for example, for a BIOS, for a firmware of a network card, whatever it's needed in the whole stack. And we can, for sure, we can scale. We can add another node which has a completely different CPU, different type of memory, different type of or amount of storage, which is called mix and match. Or you can add a storage-only node in a cluster where you can, for example, save Microsoft licenses. Everything is a complete stack. There are no software licenses, so the software is, or the features are all included. And if there's a new feature upcoming, the only thing you need to do is just doing an update. And at the end, that results in very low price and very low and lower costs than you can compare with other solutions. I don't want to talk too much about backup and disaster recovery strategies, but there are a couple of possibilities. You can use replication and snapshots on the cluster, replicate to another site. You can export to a NAS system, have a local replication target. You can do pretty much things. Very integrated with Acronis for now. Others may upcoming. We will see a bit more about that just in a second. And yes, we can go with a single node configuration for DR or backup purposes, or if you have a distributed or edge computing customer, you can place a single node in these edge locations. That's the overview, which I already started to talk about. So you can use replication, vice versa, bidirectional to another cluster to a backup node. Both of them can also be active and replicate the machines over the cross, let's say. Yeah, that's not a problem at all. The last slide from my point of view for now, that's our portfolio overview, starting with the HE150 series, a very powerful NVMe-based system. So we've seen that you can easily run 20-25 virtual desktops on an HE150 cluster. Going to the HE500 series, which is a single socket system, you can configure them as an all-flash, all-spinning or hybrid system, as well as the HC1200 and 5000 systems. There you can add GPUs, and in the HC3000 system, that's an NVMe only system. Thank you very much for the presentation part. Now we switch to William and get a live demo.
Thank you, Torsten, for your presentation. Very extremely short presentation this time. So, William, at this moment, you can turn on your microphone, turn on your camera, and start sharing the screen.
You want my camera too? There it is. Just for a moment, because it's a mess behind me. But thank you, thank you so much. Let's stick with the demonstration and save some bandwidth on the camera. So thank you, Torsten. Obviously, I'm pretty sure it was already said in Polish, but if you have some questions, please make sure to ask them in the chat so that Torsten and I can address them later on. Let's go ahead with a demonstration. What you see over here is the management interface of a Scale cluster, and I wanted to take you over the management interface and show you what we can do with this, and how this will make your life easier. So in the top left-hand corner, we see a cool Scale logo, and then next to it you see the name of my cluster and the version it's currently running. Both of these aren't really that important. What is important is how we manage the system when a upgrade is available. In other words, when an update is available, a yellow text will appear below the version number saying an update is available. And when I click on this or on the version number, I will go to the update page, and this is where a description would be of what's in that update. Unfortunately, there's no update right now, so I can't show you this, but the updates can be managed here. And a big black button saying an update is available will be shown over here. When you click apply update here, from that moment on, everything is automated. There's no user intervention needed. It will just be a process that runs along without any user influence. So what it will do is, first off, it will move all the virtual machines that run on the first node to other machines. Obviously, this is a live migrate, so you can also do this during production hours, but all the VMs will be migrated away from that first machine. Then it will be checked, and it will be checked whether it's healthy in software, and it will be checked whether it's healthy in the hardware. And once everything is okay, the update will be done on the first node. Then it will be checked again, and if everything is okay, that system will be taken back into the cluster. Once it's back in the cluster, the VMs will be migrated back to that node, and then we will continue with the second, the third, and so on and so on. Like I said, this is a rolling upgrade, so you can do this during production hours. There's a couple of things that are quite special in our update. First one being, we only sell appliances. But by only selling appliances, we always know what the hardware below the software is. And this means that we can not only include software updates, but we will also include hardware updates that are required. The second one, and this is obviously related to that, is that Since we always know what hardware is in a system, you don't need to read any hardware compatibility lists when performing an upgrade. In other words, you don't really care about the update process. It's completely automated and it will work. If for some reason the upgrade does not work, the system obviously allows you to either go back or go on with the update, and it will even allow you to let the cluster make a connection to our support department so they can check out what is wrong. In the middle here of the interface, we see the telemetry or the resource usage of this cluster. On the left hand, CPU, RAM, disk, IOPS, and latency. And with disk, I can click on that to get a detailed overview. Here we can see that I'm currently using 1.7 terabyte of my disk space for virtual machines. I'm using 1.5 terabyte for snapshots. When I click on efficiency, you can see that I'm saving 2.24 terabytes through deduplication. And on the provisioning tab, you can see that I'm using, or actually I'm saving 41% of data that's currently being thin provisioned. So it is reserved for virtual machines, but it's not allocated yet. On the left-hand side, we see our notification center. When anything is wrong with the system, one of these 4 items will light up and will tell you something is wrong with the system. And when you click on this, you will go to the conditions page where a detailed description will be here. A nice surprise here is that, for instance, a broken disk in the system will only be an informational warning. When a disk fails in a scale system, that data that is no longer, the data that's no longer redundant will automatically be made redundant again on other disks, and the disk will be evicted from the system. In other words, even when a disk fails, all your data is still completely redundant. And by having this self-healing mechanism, you could theoretically even lose 50% of your disks. Obviously, this is a theoretical number. Don't try this at home. But the system is built in such a way that theoretically it should be possible. Going one level down, we see the 3 gray blocks over here that represent the nodes in my cluster. My cluster is a 3-node cluster. Obviously, this can be bigger. It cannot be smaller, but we do, like Torsten's slides showed us, work with single node systems too. We can recognize these nodes by the IP addresses that they are given over here on the top of the gray block. And as you might have immediately seen, I am connected to the first node in my cluster. This is not mandatory. Every node in a scale cluster is a full management entity. Unlike, for instance, what you have with VMware, where there's a vCenter server, or with Xen server, where you have a master node, or with Hyper-V, where you have the SCCM virtual machine manager. We don't have such a single point of failure in our management. Every node is a management node. So if, as an example, I connect to the second node in my cluster, I have to tell it that I am me again, because I have a new session. But as you can see, all the management information here is completely equal to what it was on the first node. And if I change things over here, the change is also immediately represented on all the other nodes. So there's no synchronization time in between. On the right-hand side of the node, you can see how much RAM is in the node. And as you can see, my systems have 126 gigabyte of RAM, or 128 gigabyte of RAM in the system. And all of my systems have between 50 and 70 gigs of RAM still free. The white lines that you see below here are representative for the RAM usage per virtual machine. Such a same overview I also have for my disks, and here you can see that I have 8 physical hard drives in each system. 6 of them are nearline SAS drives, 2 of them are SSD drives. In my hyper-converged systems, system, all disks in a cluster, so all 24 disks that you see over here are part of one and the same storage pool. This means that the system can address each disk separately and make sure that storage is managed in a proper way. Although they are in the same storage pool, there obviously is a difference between SSD performance and spinning disk performance. And we manage this performance difference per virtual drive. So as an example, over here on the right-hand side, I have my Demo Labs domain controller. And when I click on the little cog over here, you see my devices, and you can see over here that I have 2 virtual hard drives. Let's click on more behind the C drive, and what you see over here is that on the top I have the configuration, the general configuration of my disk. In the middle I have how much space is allocated, and I can actually grow the virtual drive over here. And as you can see, I can even do that while the virtual machine is running. And on the bottom over here, I have the hypercore auto tiering priority. When I set this to 0, all data will be saved to the spinning disks in my cluster. When I set this to 11, all data will be saved to the SSDs in my system. When I set this between 1 and 10, all data will be saved to in the system, depending on the age of the data, depending on how often that data is being used, and depending on data from other virtual drives with a higher priority, that data will be offloaded to the spinning disks. In this way, it guarantees you that active data is on the fast disk, and passive data, data that's not being used very often, is on the slow disks, making sure you get every bit of performance out of your euros or dollars or whatever you have paid for these systems. What you can also see is I have 2 virtual drives over here, and my C drive is configured to have a heat priority of 4, and my F drive is configured to have a heat priority of 11. So I can create different performance profiles within a single virtual machine. Let's compare this to back in the days when we would still do this on a SAN. Then you would configure a RAID 1 for operating system disks, a RAID 10 for log files. You need very high performance out of those. And a RAID 5 or a RAID 6 for your table space, so where all the bulk data is being stored. Which could be slower, but I needed a lot of space there. So I can create those same profiles within a skill system. And this story brings us to the virtual machines itself. A new virtual machine on a skill system is really simple. So let's create a new virtual machine over here, and let's call it really simple. I can also give it a description. So this is for one of my demos, and I want to give this a tag demo. Now, tags within a skill system are really important. With this first tag, which you can see immediately becomes a grouping tag, I create my VM folders. So you can see over here that I have a group with infra services. I have a group which is called templates tag, and now I am creating a new group which is called demo. But I can also add it to, I can also give it other tags like this. And the first tag becomes a grouping entity. All the tags, so including the grouping tag, I can use with the filter on the right-hand side of the GUI. But I can also use this with our REST API for scripting things. In the operating system section, I choose Windows or something good. In the driver section, I choose performance or compatible. Performance are our own drivers. Compatible are like IDE and Intel E1000 drivers, so things that every operating system knows from a basic. Last time I had to use this was when I was installing a OS2 Warp system for one of my customers because they still had an application running on that. In the CPU section, I can choose how much virtual CPUs, And in my system, this is limited to 24 virtual CPUs per virtual machine because of the way my nodes are built. So my nodes, as you can see, in total, I have 36 cores, which means I have two 6-core CPUs per system. With hyper-threading means that in total, I can have 24 virtual CPUs, but I can still overcommit. So my maximum per virtual machine is 24 virtual CPUs, but theoretically, let's not try that at home because it will give a mess, but theoretically, I could give each and every one of my virtual machines 24 virtual CPUs and give them access to that. It's not going to work because of application reasons, but theoretically you could. Then I can define how much RAM this system needs to have, and I can determine how big my virtual drive needs to be. And for instance, I could also add an additional drive over here, maybe more, I don't care how many. And at boot from, I can select a installation medium. Now, when I say create over here, you will see that within 5 to 15 seconds, I will have a new virtual machine that is called Really Simple. This one still needs to be installed. It takes a little bit of time before you can actually install an application on it because Windows still needs to be installed. And that's why we also have the possibility of using templates. So you can see that I've created a group with templates over here. And this is a Server 2019 installation that I closed off with sysprep. I can simply click the clone button, make sure that it is in my demo group so I can quickly find it. Maybe give this a really simple 2, a new name. And I can clone this, and this will become a new machine. And within that same 5 to 15 seconds, I will now have a virtual machine that is immediately ready to go because I already pre-installed this. And this is really simple too. The other way that we have of getting virtual machines into our system is by making use of the import button. Obviously, a lot of our customers, a lot of you already have another virtualization technology maybe, or a physical server park. So the need to import is also really important. And when I click this button, it immediately says supports HC3 format VMs only. Well, we have a very big secret that we tell everyone. This also supports VMware virtual machines. This also supports Hyper-V virtual machines, and this also supports Xen server virtual machines. Unfortunately, you first need to export them from your current technology and then import them into our technology, and this can take several hours. And it might be so that you cannot suffer this long downtime for several hours. So we also have a software-based solution, which is called HC3 Move. This is a per virtual machine solution where you can create a replica between a other technology VM or a physical machine towards a HC3 platform. So you can create a replication between a physical or virtual machine to a HC3 system. Once that replication is done and is completely finished, you have a management console where you can say, I want to fail over now. So you select a good moment, let's say just after hours so that nobody is working anymore. You can push the fail over button. Then it will shut down the original virtual machine. It will reconfigure the target virtual machine to have the same name and the same security identifiers, reboot that virtual machine, and then you will have done your migration. And now the downtime is only 5 minutes. Obviously, this makes the migration a lot easier and a lot quicker. And like I said previously, this also supports physical machines that you can migrate. So let's look at what is in a virtual machine. Let's go back to my domain controller over here. The default view, what you see over here is the telemetry of that virtual machine. So here you can see that I'm currently using 3% of my CPU. I'm using 11 IOPS for this machine, and 33% of its disk is allocated. The first button we have over here is the power button. And well, I don't think I need to explain what a power button does, so I'm going to quickly skip that one. The second button we have is the console button. And as you can see, the console button opens a new browser window for me. So this is completely in HTML5, meaning I can work with an entire system in HTML5. For me, this is very important because my region, like Torsten's, is many countries. So I'm often flying around to go and visit customers, obviously not now, unfortunately, but visiting customers, doing proof of concepts, things like that. And when I'm in an airplane and halfway, I remember that I forgot my notebook. Obviously, I'm not that stupid, but it could happen. Because this is HTML5, I can just go into a MediaMarkt and buy myself a new Chromebook and still do all management. I don't need any additional tools. I don't need to download anything else. Even for the installation of the cluster itself, all I need is a notebook and, in the beginning, a monitor. So for me, very important that I can do everything with HTML5. Back to that default view, things that I can do over here. I can change the virtual machine with this button. I can live migrate the virtual machine to another node. When it's not running, I can really easily delete a machine over here. When it is running, obviously, I can't delete it. It's protected. And when it's running or when it's not running, I can create a quick clone or a quick snapshot. And because we use a volume shadow copy service driver in Windows or the KMU guest tools in Linux, a clone and a snapshot are application consistent. So the contents of a VM will be quiesced, and then the clone or snapshot will be made. Then we go to devices, and I'm actually going to show you the devices in the really simple virtual machine that I've created here for you. Because here you can see that not only did I mount the server 2019 ISO for the installation, but because I selected Windows in the new virtual machine wizard, I also automatically have my Scale Guest Tools DVD mounted, which means that during the installation, I have all the drivers and software available that I need to do. Then below here, we see the two virtual disks that I've created for you. And obviously, now that it's not running, I can also change the driver type. Well, we already saw that the domain controller that was running, I could still grow the disk, but now I can also change the driver type. Then on the bottom here, we have the network card. And with the network card, we do something a little bit different than other technologies. For starters, over here, I can now change the driver type. That's not really special. When for a licensing feature or anything, you need to clone a MAC address, I can do that over here. And a VLAN is set on the network card. So if you are used to using VMware, as an example, when you have a new VLAN that you need to use, you first need to configure a virtual switch to use that VLAN, and you need to include that in your uplink trunk. And then you need to attach the network card to that particular switch. In the Scale HC3 solution, we've completely automated this process. So I can just tell the network card which VLAN it needs to be in, and I can update, and then in the background, everything is being configured automatically. VLAN 102 in my environment is the server VLAN, so now it is connected to a server VLAN. But for example, if I need a new VLAN, one that I have never used before, for example, and I update, in the background, automatically new vSwitches are being built and connected to the trunk so that this system has network access. Over here, I also have the possibility to create a new hard drive, to create a new network card, etc. And the last button is to change the boot order. So let's say that I want this system to boot from the network because I'm using Pixie Boot for installation, just a suggestion. I can change this here, and then now the network card is the primary boot device. Next button is the snapshot engine, which is more interesting in a live machine. So we're going back to our domain controller over here, and you can immediately see that we have 15 snapshots active over here. So because of the way that we handle storage, we have our own proprietary file system. We don't have the overhead that all the other solutions have with snapshots. So for instance, in VMware or in Hyper-V, if you make 3 or 4 snapshots and you save them for 2 or 3 weeks, every snapshot has the capability of growing 2 or 3 or 4 times bigger than the original virtual machine. And every snapshot that you make makes the original virtual machine a bit slower because it needs to keep track of all the Delta files that are being created. We don't have that issue. We have a block-based snapshotting mechanism, which means that when data is being changed, we can do an allocate on write, as it's called, and immediately continue with the other new data without having to keep track of all those changes once the snapshot change has been written. Because of those differences, we support up to 5,000 virtual snapshots, 5,000 snapshots per virtual machine. So the 15 snapshots that I have active over here are no problem whatsoever. And my oldest snapshot over here is more than a month old. And unfortunately, I used to have older snapshots, but since I'm running a beta firmware, I had a problem with my snapshots, so I had to delete them. But you could very easily have snapshots of more than 7 years old without any problems. In the Netherlands, where I come from, 7 years is the minimum save time for tax reasons. So the other thing that you can see over here is that I create my snapshots with a snapshot schedule. So if I go to that schedule, so I go to my control center over here and then to my schedules, you can see that over here I have that particular gold schedule. I can click on edit, and here we can see that I'm making a snapshot every hour, which I locally keep for 6 hours, and on my replication side I keep for a day. Then I make a snapshot every day, which obviously overlaps with my remote side, which I locally keep for 3 days, and remote I keep for 2 weeks. And then I make a snapshot every week, which I locally keep for 5 weeks, and remote I keep for half a year. So locally I keep these copies for fast restore capabilities, and remote I keep my snapshots longer for my retention. And there, again, there's nobody stopping me from saying over here I want to have 372 weeks, which is approximately 7 years. Put an update here, and then I will do this. The only reason that I'm going to click cancel right now over here is because I only have a very tiny remote cluster and I don't have the space for that. So we already talked a little bit about remote, but you can also see that over here I've created a relationship with I created a replication relationship. So you can see over here that I've connected this virtual machine to my Cloud Unity WDVC, William David Van Collenberg, that's me. So when I go over here to my cloud cluster or to my remote cluster, you can see that I have my DC01 over here. And as you can see, this has no power buttons or anything, and that's how you recognize a replica. But you do see that I have 45 snapshots over it. Because I have longer retention times remote, I have more active snapshots over here. Now, some of you might have noticed that my schedule, my snapshot and replication schedule is quite similar to a backup schedule. And one of the first thoughts you might immediately think is, hey, William, I am really sorry, but snapshot is not a backup. And there you are right, because the snapshot data has no worth whatsoever if the original VM is no longer there. When you delete the virtual machine, the snapshot data has no value whatsoever. The same goes for a replica. When I delete data in the original VM, I immediately also delete that data in the replica. And that is the reason why we do this snapshot-based replication. With snapshot-based replication, we have both the original VM on both sides and all of the snapshots on both sides. And in my case, even more snapshots on my remote side. So on my remote side, I can go back longer in time. And that is why we say that we actually do have when you have scale snapshot-based replication, you actually do have a full backup of all your systems. Now, your next remark is going to be, William, backup is nice, but going back to a snapshot is not, let's say, a real restore. I need to be able to restore single file in a system, which is also possible. So let me go back to my demo system. Let's take this away. And over here, you see that on my F drive, I have really important data, being my shares. Unfortunately, I had a little bit too much to drink yesterday, and accidentally I deleted my shares and I emptied the recycle bin. So right now I have lost my job. Right now we can still go back to one of my snapshots because nothing else has changed. So we can just revert to a snapshot and that data is back. Unfortunately, when I change this very important Dutch data into something else, now I can no longer go back to one of my snapshots, because when I go back to a snapshot, which is a point in time copy, I go back to the point in time of that particular snapshot. And back in that snapshot time, this was still called 15 and not 16. So what do? I go to my snapshot engine over here, I open up my snapshot overview, and I can actually open this up. And here you can see that I have a C and an F drive. And you can see that my hourly snapshot is from 12 p.m. So I can go to my F drive. Over here, I can select a recovery virtual machine. So all of the virtual machines that are running on this system can be selected as a recovery virtual machine. So I can use one of my terminal servers, or I can use one of my VDI workstations, or I can just use the same virtual machine over here, which I'm going to do in this demo because it's easier. Now I click the clone button, and you can see that a clone of this block device is going to be made, and it's going to be mounted to this virtual machine. Since this is a deduplicated file system, this is immediately done. Oh, stop. This is immediately done. So I can go back to my virtual machine over here, go to the disk manager, and you will now see that a additional disk is being found, and it's offline over here. So I bring this online. Immediately it will get a drive letter, and you can see that it is a replica of the disk because it also has the same volume name over here. I go back to my browser, and now you can see my G disk over here. And as you can see here, I still have that 15 over here. I can now copy those shares, paste them over here, and I've done a full file level recovery. Right now I've done it with copy paste, so I've lost my NTFS rights. But if you do this with an application like RoboCopy or something like that, you will even maintain all the NTFS rights. So you can make a truly file level recovery here. At the end of this procedure, I will bring this disk offline again, and I will go back to my domain controller over here and remove that additional disk from the system so that it's no longer usable over here. Going back here, you can see that now the disk 2 that we just had has been removed. So in this way, we did a file level recovery. Now, I fully understand that file level recovery is not always enough, but if file level recovery is enough for your system, you could actually, or just 2 scale systems would suffice as a proper backup solution. Now, my remote cluster is a cloud entity, so mine runs in Google Cloud Platform, but this could also very easily be a second cluster that you own yourself in a different location, or maybe in 2 different parts of the building. I even have a customer in the Netherlands where they have a very small single node system at the house of the director of the company. Even that is possible. We sell very small, very quiet systems that you can actually have in a residential area. If file level recovery does not suffice for you, we also have a partnership with Acronis, where Acronis is capable of doing application level restores in a system, but is also capable of doing agentless backups of everything that is in a scale cluster. So when I go to my Acronis environment over here, again, I have to tell it that I am really me, which obviously is a secure thing to do. Over here at devices, you can actually see that I have my scale cluster over here registered as something to back up. And it can even see all the virtual machines that are currently in my system and which ones to protect. Adding a scale cluster is really, really easy. I can just click the add button over here. And over here, you can see I can select a scale cluster. I give my IP address, my username, and my password. And I give a file share, which I can temporarily use to create a agent virtual machine and then upload it to the scale cluster. Then click deploy, and my scale cluster is registered. Once registered, I immediately see all the virtual machines that are over here, and I can add them as a backup target. So over here, you see this really simple virtual machine. I can protect that as a group, or I can protect the virtual machine over here. It sees it does not have a Acronis agent installed because simply it's not running. So all I can use are the templates that do agentless, and I can just add this bronze task to this, which will do a backup every 3 hours repeatedly. Not going to do it because I'm going to delete this virtual machine, but if I click the apply button over here, it's immediately protected in my Acronis environment. And also, when I take a virtual machine over here that I've already protected, I can actually also do a recovery over there in the recovery part of this. So two ways we can do backup. The first one is with native scale replication, and because we do snapshot-based replication, it is a full backup, but this will only allow you to do file level restores. If you want to integrate a backup application, we have a partnership with Acronis for this, where you can buy a node license for Acronis and backup unlimited virtual machines. Other integrations that we have with a scale cluster include VDI solutions. So one of the things that I think is a really hot topic right now is working from home. Obviously with the COVID-19 situation, but also because more and more companies are becoming more and more modern with working from home, working while on the road, maybe having an application that should be available on mobile devices for engineers or something like that. VDI is becoming more and more popular. Scale Computing has a relationship or a partnership with two different companies for VDI. The first one being Leostream and the second one being Parallels. As part of this demo, I have a Leostream environment installed on my cluster over here, where I have a Leostream broker and a Leostream gateway. The broker is the brains of the operation, and the gateway is an entity that you put into your insecure network for internet access. And in such a way, you can have a connection with a desktop. So if I go to Leostream on my demo environment, I'm telling it I am me again. You can see that I have the possibility of starting a virtual desktop over here. So I'm going to immediately connect to this, where you will see that this opens a new browser window and starts my virtual machine. And on my cluster, because I want to have always two VDI systems waiting for me, you can see that it immediately creates a new virtual desktop here, so that I have two virtual desktops waiting for another user to come in. In the meantime, this login over here is running. I haven't optimized my VDI solution, so login takes a little while, but with proper profile management and stuff like this, this will be working a lot quicker. I haven't done that, so don't worry about the long login time. But as you can see, again, through HTML5, so this is an in-browser client. Oh, come on, there we go. This is an in-browser client, so in my browser, I'm launching a virtual desktop. Because I'm an administrator, I also have a button open administrator view over here, so I can immediately also from this same place manage the entire solution and set this up. If you have any further questions about how to work with Leostream, please reach out to Jersey for a follow-up appointment with us so we can explain further how this works. The second product that I have integrated into my system, which also is a VDI product, is Parallels. And over here, I have the Parallels broker. Parallels also has a means of having a gateway for internet access and stuff like that, which I installed on the same server, but obviously in a best practices environment, you should have a separate one there. And also here, I can go to my Parallels environment. Again, I log in to an HTML5 environment. And for this use case, I have, oh, I shouldn't do this. For this use case, I introduced two-factor authentication over here. So I'm using the Google Authenticator over here to get a token to log in. And over here, you can see my VDI desktops. Now, Parallels is slightly different than Leostream, where Parallels does VDI and published applications. Leostream only does VDI. Leostream only does VDI. Parallels does VDI and published applications. So as you can see, again, in HTML5, I'm logging into my desktop over here. This can be done in HTML5 or it can be done with a client. So for instance, I'm using a Samsung phone, and one of the things that I really like is they also have a client for Samsung DeX, so my phone can actually be my VDI client. But with HTML, with Parallels, I can also do applications. So if you have a user that only requires a single application and not an entire desktop, I don't need to give him access to that entire application, but I can just go to the application over here and have that same application run in HTML5 over here. And like you see, this application, this full Windows application, is actually integrated into my web browser. Obviously, the big benefit over here is I don't expose a complete desktop or to a end user, but only an application. Thus, I am not giving him full access to my network in this way. So a nice additional feature that Parallels has. Again, if you want to have additional information on Parallels, on how it technically works in the background, reach out to Jerzy, and he will make sure that we get a follow-up meeting on this subject where I can explain you more about both technologies. Going back to the skill solution, let's end this with going through the control center of the skill cluster. Over here in the log files, you can see that I was actually the idiot that deleted a block device. So you can blame me if something broke, meaning that the log files are by name. So we can always see who has done what. In conditions, we've seen that it's linked from my notification center. I can see details if something is wrong in my cluster. In the control page, I can shut down my cluster. In the media page, I can upload my own ISO. So if you have your own imaging ISO, you can upload this over here. Remote clusters is where I can see the status of my remote clusters. And over here, I can see the status of up to 25 clusters. Remote support, when there's a problem with my cluster and you call our help desk which by the way is open 24/7, 365 days a year, and all clusters always come with 24-hour support. When you call our support department, you will get a code from our support technician. You can put it in here, and then the cluster will make a connection to our support department. So our connection is not always open. You have to manually open that connection and close that connection. But when the connection is open, our support engineer can look into the hypercore operating system and can look into the storage system and into the networking. Our support technician cannot look into your virtual machines. Obviously, we can use WebEx or another online technology to help you with your virtual machines, but in the basics, we cannot look into your virtual machines, and so we cannot look into your data. And when I click the close connection button here, and that connection is closed, our support technician also no longer has access to the cluster itself. Schedules we've seen in detail. Settings is where I have all my general settings, but for instance, this is also where I can enable my REST API. So our cluster comes with an integrated REST API browser. So everything that I can script, I can actually try out over here. Let's say I want to run a report on my clusters to see which users are being notified if there's something wrong with the cluster. I can just simply click try it out. And then you can see over here in the response body that I am the person, WDVC is my name, who's being notified when there's something wrong with this cluster. And I can even download this as a file, so I can test my script on a file first before I test it on my cluster. The other thing that's interesting here in the general settings page is, and this is actually a bit of roadmap, this will be released in 2 months. In version 8.9, we introduced the ability to use an OpenID Connect provider, which means that you can attach a cluster to your Active Directory for authentication, or to Azure Active Directory, or to Okta or Ping, or whatever OpenID compatible identity provider you are using. And that's the reason that we chose OpenID, because OpenID has a wide range of identity providers that it is compatible with. Then we go to the SSL certificates. As you can see, I have not uploaded a SSL certificate, but you can do so. Updates, when there's an update, this will have a description of what's in the update. With user management, you can see that I made sure that my colleague Torsten cannot shut down my cluster or change cluster settings. In the support page, you can see that there are links to our community, to our partner portal, and there's a link to all the support phone numbers. So we have many support phone numbers all over the world, all dialing into our US-based support center. Just to make clear, all of our support engineers are Scale employees, so we don't have a separate call center with unskilled people in there. No, you will always call directly to the US and have a skilled Scale employee on the phone. Last but not least, when I click exit, I'm going to say congratulations to all of you. You are now Scale certified. Questions? As said before, if you have any questions, please type them into the chat. You can also type them in Polish, and Jerzy will translate them for me. So if you have any questions, now is the moment. Jerzy, are you there?
Mogą Państwo śmiało zadawać pytania oczywiście na czacie, tak jak już William wspominał, w języku polskim oraz po angielsku. O, Jerzy.
Krótkie problemy. Troszeczkę się zakręciłem. Ja tylko chcę powiedzieć, że powtórzyć jeszcze raz to, tym razem po polsku, to co kolega William powiedział. Jeśli macie Państwo jakiekolwiek pytania, to proszę kontakt ze mną. My postaramy się, jeśli będzie zainteresowanie ze strony Państwa, przeprowadzić indywidualne szkolenie, ewentualnie dla potencjalnych klientów, taką samą prezentację. No i chciałbym podkreślić to, co na sam koniec powiedział William, że rzeczywiście po wysłuchaniu tego jesteście Państwo jakby certyfikowanymi już, powiedzmy, że użytkownikami, ale to jest całe szkolenie, prawda? Tutaj chciałbym właśnie to przy zaproszeniach i przy omawianiu tego systemu zawsze podkreślam, że wystarczy godzinka czasu, żeby się stać certyfikowanym użytkownikiem, certyfikowanym inżynierem Scale Computing. Także więcej niż to, co William pokazał, nie ma, prawda? No, trzeba by może tylko troszeczkę czasu mieć, żeby zdobyć taką biegłość, jak William miał, bo tak w cudzysłowie trochę czasu, tego czasu troszeczkę więcej, ale William poruszył cały zakres zagadnień związanych z administracją systemem Scale Computing i nic już więcej tu ukrytego nie ma. Także jeśli byście chcieli Państwo, jak Państwo zauważycie, no to dokładając do tego powiedzmy jakieś 40 minut instalacji tego systemu, po 2 godzinach od otrzymania całego systemu my już wszystko wiemy i nasze maszyny wirtualne hulają, prawda, jeśli jesteśmy do tego przygotowani. Także zachęcam serdecznie do kontaktu z nami i tak jak powiedziałem, jeśli jest zainteresowanie, jesteśmy w stanie zorganizować nawet dla pojedynczych użytkowników taką samą prezentację, powiedzmy, dla potencjalnych użytkowników końcowych, którzy byliby zainteresowani naszym rozwiązaniem. Także z mojej strony to chyba wszystko. Pytań nie widzę, żeby były, także trudno, nie ma problemu, troszeczkę nam się, może nie przeciągnęło, dlatego że uprzedzaliśmy, że to będzie szkolenie techniczne i chcieliśmy pokazać wszystko, co jest związane z naszym rozwiązaniem. No i cóż, i w tym układzie zapraszam do kontaktu, zapraszam do naszych innych szkoleń z naszej firmy i na dzisiaj chyba by to było wszystko. Many thanks, William. As you may see, there are no questions. I just underlined once again what you have shown, everything which is related to certification and administration and managing the solutions. So now everyone is certified and capable to install, not maybe install, but to manage the system on their own. And of course, I invited them to the future presentation. And of course, if there is a demand, we may organize presentation for them. So many thanks for today, William. Many thanks for today, Thorsten. Thorsten is, I think he's online, but he's not a presenter, not viewable at the moment. So many thanks, guys from Scale Computing, i dziękuję Państwu serdecznie za udział w dzisiejszym spotkaniu. Jak powiedziałem, zapraszam na dalsze nasze prezentacje. Dziękuję bardzo.
Dziękuję wszystkim. Ja jeszcze tylko wrzuciłem kontakt do Jerzego na czacie, więc jeśli Państwo pojawią się jakieś pytania już po zakończeniu prezentacji i naszego dzisiejszego webinaru, no to śmiało można zadawać pytania Jerzemu. Dziękuję Ci, Jerzy.
Dziękuję bardzo Państwu.